So I think a lot of us could probably agree we may take a few things for granted. Our jobs, our cars, our home, even the food in our fridge. The problem is, a lot of us don't realize just how fortunate we are until we step into the lives of how 50% of the world lives. Current research estimates that 1 out of every 2 people globally live in poverty, making less than $2.50 per day. 80% of our world makes less than $10 a day. This is poverty. It is a cruel enemy with an arsenal of weapons. Infant mortality, hunger, disease, illiteracy, child labor. The list of obstacles that the poor must overcome can seem endless at times. Now, most people I know are appalled when I start talking about poverty, or they learn the statistics, or they learn how 80% of the world is living. However, most people I know don't think that there's anything they can really do to change that. Now, full disclosure, this is a very heavy topic, but I'm not here to depress you or discourage you or make any of you feel guilty for being born into the situation maybe you were born into. Now, I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you all that there is a very manageable solution to this very real problem. Child sponsorship programs. Child sponsorship programs provide medical attention, food, shelter, clothing, and an education to children who are chosen by people like you and I, who agreed to pay $30 to $40 a month to support a child living in poverty. There's an incredible need and immeasurable value in sponsoring children living in developing nations. I know about this need firsthand. As you had just said, I'm the Child Sponsorship Advocacy Director for a nonprofit called Transform Uganda. We are a holistic care program that provides the life-sustaining needs and a quality education to the vulnerable children living in Uganda, East Africa. I sponsor 4 kids, Matia, Miriam, Martha, and Barbara. I have had the honor of meeting each one of them and the blessing of seeing what my small contribution has been able to do in their lives. Now, I could go on and on with countless stories about all the children I know and love dearly in Uganda, and people who know me know that I do. But for the sake of time, I'm going to talk to you just about one of my kids, and that would be Matia. During my last visit to Uganda, I was able to visit Matia and his family in their home in a very small village in southwest Uganda. Now, when I arrived, I was greeted, we pulled up in a van, and I was greeted by his entire family, who they had drums, they were singing, dancing, clapping. One person was literally running circles around the van while it was moving, going, ay, 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 ay. It was such an enthusiastic welcome. I had to check behind me to make sure I hadn't just accidentally arrived with someone way more important than me. It was truly an honor to be so warmly welcomed and embraced into their family. That is a day I will never forget. Now, while I was there, Matia's grandmother, who you'll see in the top left photo there, Efrance, told me a bit more about Matia and what my sponsorship had done for him. She told me that Matia was abandoned by his mother and father when he was just a baby, and they've made no effort of coming back to him since then. And being one of 13 grandchildren that his grandparents, who are peasant farmers, tried to provide for, makes it very easy to understand how a little boy like Matia could feel lost and of little importance. She told me that when I began sponsoring Matia, she saw him transform from being a quiet, shy little boy to still being a quiet, shy little boy. But he walked around with so much more confidence. Whenever I would write a letter or send a photo, they told me that he would run around his schoolyard and show all of his friends and say, "This is my mom, look, this is my mom." Sweet boy. She also told me about the tangible things that my sponsorship was providing for him. She said he was now getting medical attention that he needed. He was getting 3 meals a day that he hadn't been getting before. He was getting new clothes, which he had never had, and he was getting an education, which she admitted they would not have been able to afford unless I was sponsoring him. But above all that, what she said what was most important, what I was providing for Matia, was hope. I was giving this little boy hope for a brighter future, something that he would not have been able to have without sponsorship due to the situation that he was born into. It was at that moment that I realized child sponsorship programs are so much more than just a monthly withdrawal from your checking account. It is an experience that really gives your life meaning and purpose for both the sponsored child and the sponsor. This next part that I'm going to talk to you about is something I had debated on whether or not I wanted to share with the general population. But the more I talk about this, the more I realize this is something a lot of us deal with and a lot of us don't talk about. So when I was a freshman in high school, after the tragic and unexpected death of two of my cousins, I suffered with depression. And it wasn't until my junior year of high school that I decided to take a Holocaust and genocide class. I know what you may be thinking. It's a pretty heavy topic for someone who's dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. And you wouldn't be wrong. I thought the exact same thing, and I almost didn't take the class. But I am so, so glad that I did. That class and the teacher that taught it drastically changed my outlook on the world around me and myself. It showed me that despite the evil and darkness that mankind has done to one another throughout time, I have a voice and I will be heard. I'm an individual who can inspire change. No matter my age, my demographic, my skill set, or even my bank statement, I'm an individual who can make a difference in this world. It was at that moment that I began sponsoring my first child, and my life truly changed. Now, when I started sponsoring, a bit more about how that changed my life. When you're depressed, it feels like you're living life in this small, tight, mirrored box. You look out, but all you can really see is your own pain and suffering just reflected back onto you. You're trying to see the rest of the world and how it's operating, but you're constantly reminded of your own sadness and grief. But by beginning to sponsor a child, those walls were completely broken down, because I was now able to look beyond myself to another child out in the world whom I had never met before, but I was able to put my focus and attention on how I could improve their life. That concept right there provided me with an immeasurable amount of emotional healing. Now, as I had mentioned, I began sponsoring when I was in high school. And I tend to get from a lot of people, that's really great, I wish I could do that, but I can't afford that. I was in high school, people, okay? I did not have a consistent job or a consistent paycheck. My only income was the occasional babysitting. So it was very easy for me to tell myself, you're just a high school student, you can't afford this, $38 a month, what's a monthly bill? You're eventually gonna have loans. So but I thought this through. I was like, I'm going to write out what I am spending my little bit of income. What am I spending that on? And I found out that on average, I was spending almost $100 a month just on going out to eat, going out with friends, going to a movie, getting a manicure. And I realized all of that was unnecessary. It was things that I was spending my money on for just short-term happiness. But in the long run, where did it get me but nice nails? And so I realized I'm going to cut out those non-necessities and put my money towards something that is actually impactful and creating a difference. So 8 years later, I now make sponsoring my 4 children the top priority in my budget. I'm sure a lot of us, it might be difficult to empathize with a child like Matia. So I'd like to paint you a picture. So go ahead and close your eyes. I want you to visualize this. Now imagine you live in a mud hut. Your floors are made of dirt. You have a thatched roof. It's only a 12 by 12 foot space. You're sharing this space with 12 other people, a charcoal stove, and your livestock. Yeah, imagine that smell. Now imagine you're 5 years old and you have to walk 2 miles multiple times each day just to fetch water of questionable cleanliness. Now imagine you only get to eat once a day, if you're lucky, and it's the same bland food. Now picture yourself as an 8-year-old, but you're unable to attend primary school because your guardian cannot afford to send you. Now imagine you get sick, but there is no money for you to seek medical treatment, so your sickness becomes much worse. For a lot of children in developing countries, this is where their story ends. You can go ahead and open your eyes. In developing nations where 92% of the world's children live, that is a true fact, UN, 7 out of 100 children will not survive beyond the age of 5 due to conditions of poverty. Writer Eli Kamarov describes poverty best as this. He says, poverty is like a punishment for a crime you didn't commit. And we can no longer say that there is nothing we can do about this. We can all agree that we will not allow children to be punished for simply being born into poverty. We can change this by beginning to sponsor more children worldwide. I truly believe that with an increase in children throughout the world being sponsored and being supported in their physiological, psychological, emotional, and spiritual well-being, we will see the lives of millions of needy children improved and drastically prolonged. You can give them hope. I truly believe, and I've heard it said before, that people in this life who really want to make a difference usually do in one way or another, because they've realized that the key to making a difference is in the understanding that individuals are extremely important, that every life matters. I believe we were created to change the world for at least one person, to serve someone, to love someone, to leave a lasting impression. One of my favorite quotes when talking about child sponsorship is from one of the world's most well-known doctors, which would be Dr. Seuss. He says, "To the world, you may be just one person, but to one person, you may be the world." So if you're currently telling yourself, "I wish I could help, but I don't have much," or "This is a serious problem, I really feel for these kids, but that's a huge problem, I can't change the world's problems," I want you all to remember this. You don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a teacher, you don't have to be a social worker, a missionary, you don't even have to be an adult to change the life of a child living in poverty. You only have to be willing. Thank you.